My name's Robyn Bradey. I'm a mental health accredited social worker. In this context, I'm the mental health trainer and consultant for the Law Society. So I run the wellbeing program here and around the state. Possibly as a result of that, but also connected with that, I also am the consultant for legal aid, the DPP, both state and Commonwealth, AFP occasionally, the tribunals, and a large number of other organisations.
You're hanging around a lot with lawyers.
I'm hanging around a lot with lawyers, just come back from hanging around with them in London, advising them about their wellbeing program in the UK. So, yep, up to my neck in lawyers, really. My angle obviously is wellbeing and trying to get legal workplaces to put provision in for wellbeing for staff, given the fairly poor health ratings that the profession's been getting consistently for a long time. Probably the best model that I've been able to work with is the one that I'm doing with the DPP, where I actually effectively work in-house, where I help sit on their wellbeing committee with them, advise their executive, do their training and coach a number of their managers. We're trying to actually get a cohort of managers together, new ones that will train together, that will understand wellbeing, that will know how to implement that in their teams, and change the culture that way. But culture change in all of the legal organisations has been glacially slow, I'd have to say. And in response to change, it's interesting, in the public sector and in the government sector in particular, they would view that they've had so much change, not necessarily innovative change, but legislative change, accountability change, staffing levels, structure levels, that they're over it. So they're actually seeing change as a very negative thing, and that it's, each new government, each new minister, each new policy change, then we're changing again, and we don't seem to be changing for good reason. And so they're change weary. So when you ask them to change their attitudes, behaviours and practices on top of that, you're digging deep to find another level of energy for them to be able to do so, I'm afraid. Although there is some will, people are very aware of how unwell they are. There's an upside as well. There was an interesting episode that happened at Legal Aid some years ago around the technology, and this ties in with what some of the previous speakers have said. They couldn't get the older workers to go to the compulsory training for the new computer system, even though it was compulsory. They were finding ways to avoid it. They were digging in, they didn't see the point, it was yet another change, and so on. I'm not sure who implemented this, but they matched them up with their Gen Ys, Xs and Millenniums, sent them along to do the training with them. To everybody's great surprise, they passed the course. To their great surprise, they passed the course. And two unexpected benefits came out of it. One was the lovely pollinisation between the generations, which I think is a way to go with change. If we could get the young lawyers working more with the older lawyers, to help them with their fears about the technology and to show them how it can be used, and at the same time the older lawyers can pass on practice wisdom and show the young ones that they do know a thing or two, and that tradition and that the knowledge and practice wisdom are important, that would be good. And the second bounce that nobody expected was that these guys got better at their day job for some months to come, because they got such a boost from having learnt something new and having passed it, that they realised there still was some learning in them yet. Now, I find that really interesting, and from a mental health point of view, the training program that we do is brain-based, and we talk a lot about how the brain works, and in a way that's an innovative way to train in mental health, because we're not talking about pathology, we're talking about this is how your brain works, this is why these strategies work, because they're brain-based. We talk a lot about the neuroscience, and we talk a lot about how you work with your brain the way it would prefer to work. And one of the things I tell all the lawyers at all of the training is that the brain likes to learn. So given the level of depression, depression starts off usually as boredom or anxiety, becomes a rut, becomes worse as a result of feeling like you've got nowhere to go, and people doing the same practices day in, day out, so that their brain isn't firing up new mechanisms, isn't getting the impetus and the myelin that it needs to be able to keep learning. And so lawyers are getting dumber. Actually. Sorry, can I say that?
You have.
Okay, I have. And it's on film. Excellent. But if they can learn new skills, whatever they are, whether it's the technology, whether it's getting their head around the devices, whether it's the new computer program, or a new way of billing, God help us, that would be good. I would join the queue of really liking a good look at billable hours, and I'm despairing to see that billable hours has been brought into the government sector as well. And the workloads there are making that very difficult for people to manage. And this whole concept of the worth of non-billable hour work. And if you're going to get people to embrace change, they're going to need time to get their heads around this change. They need the training for this change. And they're all seeing that as being non-billable hours and adding to their pressure to be able to do the work. But on the upside, if we could get them learning some new skills that aren't directly related to the law, that require different skills to what they use day in, day out, their brains will love it. And if their brains love it, then their moods will improve. And I can see it as being a mechanism to jolt the profession out of its lethargy a little bit and get people excited about learning new things, so long as they see a reason for them. So I think what we're swimming against is this whole tide of change for change's sake. So we've got the legislative and policy changes that I've mentioned, which are absolutely exhausting everybody. And I work a lot in the community sector where the funding has also disappeared, and so the changes they are making are scrambling changes to be able to try and get to see the clients with less resources and so on. But we're also getting people bringing in new systems that nobody's really understood or at least explained how they're going to benefit the organisation. So I think there needs to be a lot more upfront work done, so that, and from bottom up, the people come along to, we're thinking about this change. This is the technology. This is how we think it's going to help. What do people think about it? We need to give the black hats a bit more air so they can say, well, it's going to cause these problems, isn't it? And we need to listen to the black hats. And then we need to let the white hats, which the change agents hate, slow us down a bit and problem solve it a bit beforehand. And then as people get that things are being thought about carefully, that it is to their advantage, that they've had enough time to get their head around and learn it, then they're fine. But if they feel it's been imposed, they don't really see what it's there for, they feel alone in trying to manage it, and to cope with the extra additional change on top of the billable hour work, then they get resentful, they get passive aggressive, and they get very bad at it. And then we get people, that goes back into the anxiety, mental health, depression mix that people are having.
So you've got a downward spiral.
Yep, and it becomes a circular spiral. All these things feed into each other. So I think there's an upside and a downside. I think we need to look at this technology-driven change in the context of all the other behavioural and structural changes that are being expected in workplaces. And in the public sector, I think we've got a whole different discussion in terms of their roles changing and their staff levels changing and their tiredness with this process. It's been fairly relentless for quite some time.
You mentioned at the outset that there's a poor health rating for the profession. Can you just expand on that?
Well, the figures that got me involved in the Law Society here in Australia was that the mental health figures for the general population were that 1 in 5 people would suffer a mental health bad enough to debilitate them for a period of time, and 1 in 3 lawyers would. Currently, I think it's still the case, the suicide rate of lawyers is higher than any other profession. The suicide rate of law students is higher than medical students for the first time. The rates of isolation amongst lawyers around the world seems to be increasing. As I mentioned, I've just come back from the UK, where I've been working with the Bar Council, and they've just done the largest study on the health of lawyers that's so far been conducted. And isolation, depression and feeling unsupported in the profession were extremely high in that survey. So high that the Bar Council has decided to act. And so they are now in the process of trying to get a wellbeing program going over there. They're about to launch a portal, and they're focusing very much on depression and anxiety. But the other thing that's come into the space fairly recently, which the New South Wales Bar Council has also taken notice of, is vicarious trauma in the law.
Can you explain that?
Vicarious trauma is the PTSD that you get from hearing about the client's PTSD. So it's the trauma you get from other people's trauma, is the simplest definition. And that's always been a sleeper in the legal profession, certainly in my experience of working in the public sector and working with Royal Commission lawyers and lawyers that work with abuse and childhood abuse and those kinds of things. It's always been there. But in my recent discussions with agencies like the CDPP and the AFP and the British Bar, lawyers are going to war zones. They're seeing footage of beheadings in this country. They're getting more child sex trade kinds of cases than they've ever seen before. God bless the Royal Commission, and I certainly do, because I didn't think I'd see it in my working lifetime, but the flood of prosecutions that have come out of multiple child victim prosecutions that the DPP is now dealing with is unprecedented. So we're hearing at our wellbeing committees young lawyers saying, I used to have one of these matters every couple of years. I've got 3 a week now. And we got up to 30 victims. So the nature of the work has also changed. And certainly when you add, ISIS and beheadings and terrorist threats and all those kinds of things, then lawyers worldwide are seeing much more nasty material than they've ever seen before.
So what's the answer?
Well, the answer is to train everybody. We need to expect this. This is a foreseeable risk. And we need to be giving lawyers, law students at university, knowledge about vicarious trauma, knowledge about preventive care. There are things people can do. That we need procedures, and this would be a very useful innovation that I am talking to Crown Souls and DPP and a number of organisations about how to have processes for looking at distressing material, how to train people to approach the material, how to use mindfulness techniques to be able to do that. And the workplace needs to be proactive in that, because we know that this work is injuring, and we've got increasing numbers of lawyers going down with issues around this.
This was something that I think came up years ago in relation to emergency service personnel.
Yes. I mean, it came up. It's been discussed, and I noticed that they're at Model Mark 4 about how they're going to deal with it now. Just recently, where they now decided to combine those services to get a more unified approach to vicarious trauma. We've been fiddling at the edges with this for a long time, and we've been telling staff that it's their problem, and the law's got a habit of saying toughen up. And if you can't deal with the material, then maybe you're in the wrong job. But even the most dedicated prosecutors and people that are doing the kind of work they're doing because they love it are facing material they've never seen before.
Does this also apply to lawyers who don't do that sort of work, but do, for example, commercial dispute work, which is the area I practice in? And if over the years you're listening constantly to the legal problems that your clients have, is that likely to impact on the
There's no
law?
question that, yes, and family law.
Family law.
If you're dealing with people behaving badly and fighting with each other all day, it does affect your worldview, no question. Always has. I think it has been, again, the sleeper contributor to the levels of anxiety and depression in the law. It's just never been talked about and acknowledged before. And I think the response has been that we've taught lawyers to turn their empathy down and not get emotionally involved and give that sort of advice, which brain-wise and psychologically does not work, and gives us potentially psychopath lawyers. There may be, it's an interesting study, there may be a correlation between the increase of client complaints about lawyers and clients' habits of withdrawing themselves from the lawyers' habits of withdrawing themselves from the emotional content of the work as a self-protection, because the customer feels they're not there. And they're missing a lot of the information that clients and customers are giving them because they've shut down on some levels. So what looks to have a surface logic is not helping the health of profession, I don't think. So we need to find, I think the attitude needs to be, the work is distressing, it's also challenging, it's skillful. Let's teach you the ways to deal with this material, put in place the structures that can support you with this material. And I think the big yawning gap, and certainly where the UK bar's going with this, is mentoring and having older, wiser members of the profession who aren't your direct reports and don't have control of your career to be able to help you deal with some of these issues. But along with just good, simple practices in workplaces about, coding files so that you don't happenstance across a file with distressing material in it, that you can call for assistance if it is distressing, that we think about returning from parental leave situations and not throw you straight into child sex cases and so on, which is a discussion I know the CDPP is having at the moment. So there's a whole range of things that can be done procedurally, practically and skills-wise for the lawyers themselves that we should be teaching at university. To give them those kinds, to give them the heads up, this is going to be difficult. Actually doing this well, however, is fantastic. Taking pride in doing this work and recognising that you're contributing to the community hugely doing this work is also a great armour. But you don't hear that very much. You just hear, this is your job, get on with it. And if you're suffering, oh well, you're damaged goods, and we'll work to get you out.
What should the Law Society be doing as a professional body for 30,000 solicitors in the state.
Well, it's already trying to do quite a bit of it. It's got quite a number of its programs going, including the one that I do the training in, but it needs to be providing forums, I think, where these discussions can be had. I think it needs a more proactive relationship with the schools of law. We need to start this with baby lawyers signing up for law school, and this is starting to happen. I think it is already trying to look at counselling alternatives and means that lawyers can access to talk to people about their state of mind and what's happening for them. That's been a very slow uptake of that because no lawyer wants that on their record. So we do need to get even innovative about that. We need to think about how we make services available, perhaps online. And that is one. There's a lot of online counselling services available now that might get more uptake from lawyers because no one knows who they are. So that might need to be added to the list of things.
Well, also, I guess, being able to recognise that
Yep.
there is an issue.
Yep. And that's the basis of the program we run, is these are the early warning signs. This is how you know it in yourself. This is how you might notice it in a colleague. These are the signs of particularly vicarious trauma and depression. And then the other skill-based training about how do you have the conversation, which terrifies most lawyers the first time round. To my great joy, the DPP, God bless them, 2 years ago, let me do suicide prevention training across the whole office, around the whole state, and we spoke to every member of staff. And we had conversations about if you're worried about somebody, what would you say to them? Where would you be able to refer them? And we've had several instances come back where people believe they've saved lives as a result of that conversation. The vicarious trauma one needs to be on the table. If you're working in these certain areas, we know the risk areas. Then these are the practice habits you need to have to approach the material and to get support afterwards. And if you do that, actually you can approach this material in a very helpful way and have a long career in it.
Are you aware of any university in Australia that helps educate law students in relation to these issues, or in fact students from any other faculty?
I think it's Flinders in Adelaide University, in Adelaide, it's one of the Adelaide universities anyway, has implemented a mentoring program which starts with receiving your place in law school. When they ring you up to say you've got your place, a fourth year student contacts that person immediately and says, I'm your mentor, let's meet. And then they go straight into a mentoring program from the day they start at university. And then the hope is that those ones will become the next Year 4 mentors and so on. So that's one active program I'm aware of. I know that University of New South Wales has forums and they've worked with the Tristan Jepson Foundation, and I've gone along with Murray Jepson and had some conversations there. But I don't think enough is happening in this space. One of the things I'd like to see happen, and there's been talk about it, is actually talking to all new law students about whether it was the law they really wanted to do. That would be a good start. And to have more flexibility in the university courses so that if by Year 2 or Year 3 you're thinking this isn't for me, it's easier to cross into another faculty, taking credits with you, so that we're actually getting people consciously thinking about whether the law is their career and being able to divert elsewhere if they want to. Now there's been talk about that, but I'm not aware of how many universities are actually implementing that.
The Law Society and New South Wales Young Lawyers have extensive mentoring programs, but are you aware as to whether these programs have some focus or form of education for the mentors in identifying and identifying potential mental health issues?
I'm not directly aware, but I would hope so. I would hope that any implemented mentoring program selects carefully and trains the mentors, and then has an ongoing monitoring of those mentors. And I'm aware that organisations like the AAT and some of the larger organisations have very well thought through mentoring programs that take all that into account. Yes, there is the brain science tends to suggest that mentoring is fantastic for the brains of the mentors, as long as you've got the right match and they still want to be doing it, and it's not too much of an overload on top of their normal other duties. And it's actually an argument that it may be better for the brains of the mentors than the mentorees, but so I consider that a win-win.
Yep.
But obviously people can be burnt out, or their personal circumstances change, or their own work issues can come in. So mentors need to be very properly supported, very properly trained, and they need to know the difference between mentoring and counselling. so that they should have a list of resources that makes it easy for them to refer their mentorees appropriately for any of their mental health issues or any issues that are beyond their skill set to deal with.
Question?
Robyn, in light of how you've positioned, or the statistics you've given, for example, of mental health in the profession, so are you saying that change, as long as it's done well and positively, is actually something that this profession in particular should be embracing?
Absolutely, I think so. I think there's dare I say this again, I think part of the problem of the depression is that traditionally the law has in a way been a backward-looking profession. It relies on precedents, it relies on what's gone on before, and so on. And there's a place for that, and there's a really useful component that should be retained. So I'm not talking throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But certainly the brain science and the mental health stuff is all very clear that stretching people just enough to learn new skills constantly over a work span will improve their mental health and will make them smarter at the core component of their work. So we need to get a message across that you need to keep learning in law, and that the way you've done it for 30 years might still be good enough, but it's not great for you. And as we think about lots of lawyers working longer and older, we're not preparing them for we know that retirement's a very big risk time for professional people. And if the older workers have been going to courses, learning things, learning the new systems and seeing the benefits and then possibly teaching others as they leave the profession, then they're our next batch of mentors. They're people, they will be weller when they leave, and they will have had a more fun and fulfilling work life. We need the balance, and it does need to be, as other speakers have indicated, very properly managed. Lawyers always need to see a reason for doing something. So they don't, I heard somebody say it's there, we should use it. Well, yeah, that's not going to convince a lawyer, really. He wants to know why he should use it, what benefit is it to him and his clients. And then if he agrees with that, then he wants proper training to get his head around it so that he knows how to use it competently, so he or she's not embarrassed in front of other people, not knowing how to use the gizmos. You can see I'm a very educated technology person myself.
Aren't we all?
I'm hiding my BlackBerry in my pocket as we speak.
Robyn, can I take you back to something you said earlier that really sparked my interest, especially after hearing some of the speakers about technology and even yourself about technology, and that is that the isolation rate of lawyers is increasing. It's ironic, isn't it, that the World Wide Web that brings us all together actually can result in isolation.
Yep.
Can you give us as legal professionals some tips on how to reconnect in a human way when digitally we're so already unbelievably over-connected?
Yes, yep. I mean, I would like to see more. I'd like to see more focused, short-time face meetings. I'd like to see less email communication, less reliance on email communication as the default point. Mm-hmm. From a wellbeing point of view and relationship point of view, that if you see the face, you know what's happening for the person, and you develop the relationship, and so they go off and work harder for you in between. Skype can be an innovative thing because at least you can see a face over the Skype rather than hear the voice down the phone. From a duty of care point of view, supervisors and supervising lawyers and practice managers need to see faces. So Skype could be used more creatively than it is, I think. I think we could lessen the meetings and lessen the communication and make them more focused. And then you could use a mixture of your technology, but people know what the point of the meeting is. They're not stressed out by the meeting. And we also then need that billable hours discussion to be had. And how you value non-bill. I'd like to see the thing go myself, frankly. Can I put that on the record? I'd like to see some robust arguments for billable hours being retained in the 21st century in any work setting. And I'd like a new model. I don't know what it is yet. The lawyers need to discuss it, where it values non-billing work as much as the actual direct work with the client and so on. And then that would encourage lawyers to do some of the more project work. That would encourage them to take time for their meetings, get up from their desk, go and talk to their colleagues. And if all of that could be valued and we take the billable hour pressure off, that would be a huge step forward. I think there's some evidence, and I can't remember the study, but I do remember reading in one of the law magazines that anxiety and depression went up in law firms at the billable hour filling out time.
I can relate to that.
So we know this regular dip of have I done enough? How are they going to see it? And the time to do it, notwithstanding.
Just out my curiosity, does open plan help to some extent these issues?
It can't. Well, you need the ideal environment would be open plan and closed door places you can go to. I think we should make the workspace closed door and have common areas that people are encouraged to spend some time in. So lawyers go nuts if they can't concentrate to do their work. So not being able to close doors has usually been the kind of thing that upsets teams that I have to deal with. But on the other hand, the isolated, depressed lawyer in their room at the end of the hall that nobody ever sees is a disaster waiting to happen. So I think we need flexible space. I think there need to be rooms that people can go into. I think there needs to be more careful planning of meeting rooms. And also on that, actually, if they could move floors would be good. I think standing workstations, working between floors and moving around the building would address a lot of the vicarious trauma issues and a lot of the health issues as well. So it's not either or, but open plan in itself is nuts, I think. And just ask the lawyers how they think about their open plan and watch the size of the plants they put at the edge of their workstation to block vision of everybody else. And that'll give you your answer, I think.